Greetings and welcome to the pod. My name is Mark West. Sorry it's been a little while since the last episode. I've been off doing stuff. But this week, at the start of the Australian summer, we're looking at one of the most important aspects of beach going, rips. Rips claim an order of magnitude more lives than shark attacks and are arguably the most dangerous facet of going to the beach. Associate Professor Rob Brander, also known as Dr. Rip, is a coastal geomorphologist who studies morphodynamics. More on that in a minute. But he has a particular interest in rips and the safety of beachgoers. He runs a beach education program called Science of the Surf, and one of the cool things he does is publish a Rip of the Month. Coming into summer, listen in as Rob lets you know how to spot a rip and what to do if you're caught in one. I started by asking him what exactly is morphodynamics.
A geomorphologist is somebody who studies the processes that create different landforms. So a coastal geomorphologist, I study coastal processes that create coastal landforms. And morphodynamics is a theory that explains how the shape or the morphology of coastal landforms are influenced by the hydrodynamic processes like waves and currents, and how they drive sediment transport, and how it's all linked together. So if you change the morphology, you change the waves and currents, and that alters the sand moving around, and it's like a big feedback loop. So that's what I do. I try and study how these coastal systems work, and if you change them, how it's affected.
And your accent gives you away. You're originally from Canada. How does someone from Canada get into surfing?
Yeah, well, I started doing physical geography when I was an undergraduate at the University of Toronto, and the lecturer was a coastal geomorphologist, and his stuff really interested me. So I ended up working with him, doing his field work in the summers, and that involved beach experiments and diving and stuff. And then I did my master's there, and then I came across, after that I went backpacking to Australia, and I was looking for a PhD, and one of the guys from Sydney Uni took me to a local beach in Sydney, Bronte, and he started pointing out these rip currents, which I studied, but I hadn't actually seen one. And that just got me interested in rips. And to make a long story short, I came back a year later to do my PhD on rips.
Or do you live in Tamarama, or you're a member of the Surf Life Saving Club there? So that's still pretty close to Bronte.
Yeah, no. When I came back to do my PhD, I just lived in a shared house in Tamarama, and then sort of a long story, but I managed to become the caretaker. I joined the club at Tamarama, and then I became the caretaker. So I lived there for about 3.5 years, basically wrote my PhD in the back room there, and now I'm a life member. But we moved away from the eastern suburbs about 5 years ago, but still love those beaches.
Oh, they're beautiful. Well, the Bondi to Bronte's on the weekend. It swims past Tamarama Beach.
Okay.
So
okay.
You're known as Dr. Rip, and you're throwing purple dye into the beach at Tamarama. What does that do? What does throwing dye into the water do?
Well, when I was doing my PhD, I was studying under a guy named Andy Short, and Andy Short is a bit of a legend in the coastal world. He was a coastal scientist, coastal geomorphologist, and he used to take me on his student field trips here, and he'd release dye into rip currents for educational purposes, and I thought that was quite powerful, and I ended up using dye for some of my experiments in my PhD just to see where the rips were and what they were doing. And then I thought, well, why restrict that just to science and education? It has a great educational benefit for people. So when I started the Science of the Surf back in 2001, it started at the Surf Club at Tamarama, and I'd just give a talk, like a PowerPoint presentation, and finish up by putting dye in the rip. And that was what interested people. I think the media got into the dye, and that's where it all started, really.
So what is a rip? I mean, technically, what is a rip?
Yeah, a rip is like a river of the ocean, and it's a strong, narrow, seaward flowing current that normally is channelized, and it sort of starts from the beginning of the beach and goes out through the surf zone, and it's there to take all the water that's brought shoreward by the breaking waves back offshore. So it's like a machine. It's there to get that water back offshore. And if you've got channels between the sandbars, then it just gets funneled, and they can stay for quite a while.
Yeah, because I think I read on one of your pages somewhere. It's an interesting idea. All this water is being brought to the shore in waves. It has to go back somehow.
Has to go somewhere. I mean, when you get really long beaches, like if you go up northern New South Wales and Queensland, often the main currents are flowing along the beach, so you get this steady longshore current. You still get rips, but the water's got to move around. So rips are just the main way of getting water back offshore, and they're ubiquitous. If you've got a surf beach, you got sandbars and waves, you're going to have rips, and that's in Australia and around the world.
I guess podcast's not the best medium for this, but how do you spot them?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I try, and that's my main motivation is getting people to spot them. And I think, to me, it's logic. There's some logic behind spotting them because the most common type of rip current sits in these deep channels. So deeper water is always darker, and less waves break when the water's deeper. So if you look at the surf, if you're like standing at the headland of Bondi and looking along the beach, what you're looking for are these patterns where, you've got white water everywhere, where it's breaking, and then you may have these narrow green gaps, maybe 10, 15 meters wide, kind of heading out like a dark path through that white water. So I've got this saying that white is nice, green is mean, because the white water means it's shallow, green is mean because that's deeper water and it could be a rip. But if you get in the habit, there's other clues. I mean, the rips take water out, whereas waves bring it in, so there's always this constant interaction, and the surface of the rip always looks a bit bumpy and ripply, looks a bit different. And also some of these rips that are channelized can get stuck in the same place for days, weeks, and months, and they can actually start to scour out and erode a little embayment along the beach. So there's all these visual clues, and at the seaward end of the rip, it's spewing out seaweed and sand, and you can see these turbulent clouds at the ends of rips. But you need to know what to look for. And I think once people are told what to look for and they see some examples, then they start to get it.
I saw that now that Qantas is putting things in in-flight welcome videos for international flights on what to look for. Is that's thanks to you in part, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know if it's thanks to me, but I know that Surf Life Saving has done that, which is fantastic. And I'm not exactly sure what the content is and what the messages are. It doesn't matter. Anything's better than nothing. But I know it's been a constant struggle for a long, long time to get anything on the planes. So what they've done, Surf Life Saving, is impressive to get it in there. Anything's good.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting stat that I guess it's about 10 times more people die from rips than shark attack over the last, I think, 15 years or something like that.
Yeah, it's probably higher than that. I mean, on average, in a typical year, you get about, say, 20 confirmed drownings in rips in Australia. It's probably higher than that, actually. And in a typical year, you get one shark fatality, maybe a couple. So, yeah, I guess 10 times, but it's a lot more.
A lot more. Yeah, order of magnitude. And so what should you do if you get stuck in a rip?
Yeah, well, I guess the universal thing is not to panic, and that's what we all say. Of course, that's easier said than done when the beach is disappearing and you're having trouble getting out of it. But panic's the key. Panic is what drowns people. Rips don't pull you under. They don't take you to the opposite side of the ocean. But panic affects your breathing, and you can drown in 30 seconds. So that's the key thing, is we want to tell people to not panic. And that's one of the challenges at the moment, I think, is how do we convey that message in a way that reduces the panic response. So I sort of tell people it's a ride. Rip is just taking you for a ride. That's all it is. And while you're in that ride, signal for help. But that's what drowns people. The other thing, of course, is don't swim against the rip because they flow pretty fast. And, if you're not a good swimmer, you're not going to make it, and you're just going to tire yourself out, and then you're going to panic. And then there's always this the long-standing advice, swim parallel to the beach, which sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. You have to be a pretty good swimmer. And then the final one is just stay afloat and conserve your energy and signal for help. But there's no one single, other than don't panic, there's no one single piece of advice in terms of what you should do, swimming parallel or floating, that works in all cases. Rips are far too complex.
And I guess the really good ocean swimmers can probably spot them and then use them for their advantage.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, surfers use them all the time. Ocean swimmers use them all the time. Body surfers use them all the time. I'm always jumping into rips, but every now and then you'll jump into one that's a bit stronger than you thought, and you think, oh, geez, I probably shouldn't have done that. But once you understand how they work, you can use them.
So you're a pretty active surfer and ocean swimmer as well?
I'd say body surfer. I used to be a very active body surfer, but when I get older with kids and a busy job, I don't body surf nearly as much as I used to, which was a lot.
I love your Rip of the Month webpage.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably the only thing I update on a regular basis on that website. Just I just don't have the time, but that's useful, and I think I've been doing it now for almost 8 years, maybe longer. And so you're looking at 100 plus images of different rips, and I'm pretty sure that's the largest collection of photographs of rips in the world.
I guess, yeah, into the future there might be drone images, might be able to do some auto processing of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's already. I mean, there's heaps of great pictures coming of rips thanks to drones, but it's an unusual angle, right? So the problem with rip current pictures is most of them are taken from high up because it's easier to see the rips. But that's not how most people see the beach. Most
That's
people
right,
see the
yeah.
beach from on the beach. It's always harder, but you just start with pictures. But yeah, I mean, there's we're trying to get grants and things like that to use drones and smartphones to take images of beaches to help map the rip current locations, and that'll happen.
And so is that? I was looking at your publications on Google Scholar, and there's a wide range of things there. But is that one of the areas you're interested into the future?
Absolutely, yeah. Trying to get some sort of real-time mapping of rip currents going would be fantastic, and it's definitely doable. Definitely doable. But there's different types of rips, and the ones that would be possible to map using pictures and drones would be these channelized rips that I've talked about, because they do have strong visual characteristics.
Can you instrument up like buoys or some floating devices as well to give you that sort of information, or?
The only thing that something in the water would tell you is how fast the rip is flowing, and that's only going to tell you a speed at that particular location. So in terms of images, no, something in the water is not really going to help that much.
The Science of the Surf Facebook page, that seems pretty well updated.
Yeah, I'm always putting content when I can. It's not just about rip currents; it's mostly about rips. But I try and put anything interesting related to coastal stuff on there. Although these days it's only the old people who look at Facebook. Uh,
You need a Snapchat.
yeah, I need to get into that stuff, but it's just time, and I'm quite happy for Surf Life Saving and those people to take the lead on social media. Um, and the book was a fun thing to write, and it's actually, I got an email that they've run out, so they're talking about doing another run, but it's sold about 7,000 copies now.
Oh wow! And you were involved in a documentary as well.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, a doco maker from the Gold Coast contacted me wanting to do something on rips, and a lot of people had contacted me, and nothing ever happened. So I just sort of went along with it, not expecting anything to happen. But he did this fantastic job, and it came out last year on National Geographic Channel, Rip Current Heroes, it's called, and it's brilliant. He's done such an amazing job. It's so powerful and educational and gripping. It's quite emotional watching it, and so that was amazing. But again, not everyone has access to it. If you don't have the Foxtel channel, you don't have access to it. But it is being shown on Qantas. It was shown on Qantas last year, and it'll be shown on Qantas again this year on international and long domestic flights. And and we put it on YouTube as well. There's also a teaching guide, so high school teachers can access this teaching guide for free and show them the documentary. And it's a really amazing doco, to be honest.
And you, speaking of schools, you work in schools doing a schools program with how to spot rips and that sort of thing?
Yeah, because I used to do my Science of the Surf community presentation. I did for about 4 or 5 years at various places, mostly Tamarama, but people would say, oh, this is great. These are people who lived on the beach all their lives. And they said, we never knew any of this stuff. And why isn't it in the schools? And I thought, well, that's a good point. I just would have assumed it was in the schools, and then I found out that there wasn't a lot going on. So I started creating this talk for schools, and I spent a few years talking to a lot of schools, but now again, it's just time, and I don't do as much. And there's a lot of really good programs getting into the schools now. But again, it's not every school is getting surf education when I think they should be.
And so maybe just to finish up on the academic side, where is your research going to take you over the next few years, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I started off studying literally the hydrodynamics, the physics of rip current flow, so putting in current meters and really looking at the hardcore science. But now I've almost completely shifted to looking at the social science aspects in terms of, what do people know and how can we educate them better? And because I think that's where you're going to save lives. So we've done lots of studies over the last few years looking at people's understanding of rips and beach safety. I've done studies on international students. So I think in the future, I'm going to keep along this vein and getting really interested working on the issue of bystander rescues in the surf. So these are people who go in to save somebody and often get in trouble themselves. And Surf Life Saving is very interested. So we're working on that. I'm getting interested in looking at international tourists, more focusing on international tourists and recent migrants and their understanding of beaches and how we can get through to them. So it's, the ideas always generate, but and I'll probably I'm expanding beyond rips, and I'm starting to look at surf zone injuries, like people getting injured in the shore break. There's lots to do.
Do you know off the top of your head what's the biggest injury that happens in the surf break? Do people bust their shoulders, or is it just getting winded? Or
no, they break their collarbones, they broken bones. The worst case is spinals. I don't know the actual numbers in Australia, but there's actually quite a lot of spinal injuries, broken necks, paraplegia, people getting slammed. But a lot of it is just, basic broken bones and contusions and cuts, but they're serious. And when you look at serious spinal injuries, then you've got a lifetime medical care issue there as well. So we're starting to look at different types of beaches and the physical type of beaches and relate that to the type of injuries that occur and when they occur. So there's always a link between these things and the physical conditions. So that's what I like doing, is linking the social with the physical.
So we might see you on Bondi Rescue at some point soon.
I've been on Bondi Rescue before, a couple of times, but just briefly. But I haven't been asked back for a while. But I work with those guys a lot. I've not, I lived at Tamarama for so long. I knew most of those guys when they were kids and teenagers. And,
right.
And I actually had a student a few years ago do a study looking at the educational benefits of watching Bondi Rescue. And it turns out that there's a lot. And particularly people overseas, that's how they're learning about the flags, and that's how they're learning about rips is by watching Bondi Rescue.
Thanks very much to Associate Professor Rob Brander for taking the time, in amongst home renovations, to have a chat about rips. If you'd like any more information on what you've heard today, get over to the website at www.thepodpodcast.net. That's www.thepodpodcast.net. And there you'll find links to all of Rob's media that we chatted about today. Thanks for joining me. The next episode won't be so far away.